Well, it is time to install the supercharger on the Marauder, and we're getting started with the part breakdown. We've got so many parts in this box and packing peanuts, courtesies to ADTR for the beautiful packaging, the setup, and keeping the investment safe and getting it here safely. So I am absolutely ready to get everything in this car, man. We said we were gonna keep it stocked, but that's just not happening. Bam. We got the air box and the filters, so we're just getting into this package right off the bat. I'm gonna suck some of the peanuts out too, just so I've got that stored somewhere else. We've got the fan. We're gonna have to do modifications to the fan to get that to fit in, so that's here. Kind of watch out, that bad boy is sharp. Whew. Those replacement fans are always sharp. And in here we got the brackets, man. We got brackets, and they're even got on here written lower intercooler to core support brackets. Oh yeah, that's to hold the intercooler in there. At first we were thinking we weren't gonna intercool, but this is a street car, so we gotta do the intercooling, man. We gotta do it. We've got the intercooler in here, and she's a chunky girl. Oh yeah, that is quite the package, and that's gonna have all the parts on it I need. Everything was custom made and custom fitted in order to put this on the Marauder. They've got that set up and welded together already, I see. Great. We got the boost pipes in here. There we go. They're nice and wrapped up to keep the peanuts out of it. We don't want to suck peanuts into the engine. These are the intake pipes as well as the discharge pipes. Those are custom made, custom fitted, very high quality. Man, we're just gonna get down into this packaging. There's so many things in here. We've got couplings. We got 3-inch T-bolts, 4-inch T-bolts, 4.5-inch T-bolts. Man, we've got just everything in here. Okay. Getting down to this part, we got some more. We got the coolant reservoir. Man, they even packaged the coolant reservoir with it, dude. Like, this is insane. Like, literally, it's bolt-ons, but we've got a few custom things we've got to do, but not much. Most of the custom work was done and knocked out with this excellent kit. So, power steering reservoir to cooler, the brackets and the mounting hardware. Man, that's like everything. Some of these things, of course, we're going to hash it out one at a time. I'm going to have to do this part by part since it is a daily driving vehicle. But once I knock out the main parts, it's just going to be, hey, get the supercharger in there, get the boost pipes in there, and it's time to send it. All right, got the Innovate 3-in-1. Of course, comes with several sensor cables. What we're going to go ahead and do is install these cables into the Marauder so that we can actually get this gauge hooked up. Here's the 4-in-1 gauge. It's actually 4-in-1. Bam. Got the wideband 02, that's an LSU 4.9, and I don't mean Louisiana State University. Alright, got a serial cable for data logging, got our boost and vacuum pressure indicator, comes with a little bong, an Innovate tag as usual. I've got several of those, and an instruction manual, put that on the side. And another sticker with an ethanol sensor to detect temperature and ethanol content, because, well, why not? We gotta have that. One change that's being made to the Marauder is that this center gauge cluster that comes with the stock autometer gauges normally has 2 positions. Of course, this will show boost, ethanol content, as well as air-fuel ratio, so I would like it to be the closest to me. We've also got our oil pressure. We'd like that close as well. And the last one will be the voltage gauge, because we do want to at least keep some stock appearance. Here, we'll just pop this out. The modification of this is relatively easy. I'm going to use a 2-inch circular drill to drill this portion out. Move our wires out of the way, and it can be optimal to take all your gauges out. I did not do that in this situation. I'm just going to use my simple drill and position it in the most optimal position possible. Getting things a spinning start, I was able to get straight through it. It is very even, but that was very hard to do. So we'll have 3 gauges in this gauge pod, and that should show up well once we put the gauge in. Making those gauge cluster modifications to the little center console auto meter setup. Added that 3rd hole. I feel like that did very well. It was a more difficult hole to target, but everything is installed. We got the wideband, we got oil pressure, and we got voltage, as well as of course our boost and everything else that's integrated in that gauge. So we'll give it a program and we'll get it in the car, and that's about it. Okay guys, here we're gonna get the wideband installed. To start out, there's actually an area under the dashboard, and you'll see a plate in here. That plate sits up top. I can't get the greatest footage of it, but we'll get it here. What we're gonna do, there's a grommet that goes into the engine bay area behind this installation and this insulation that is in the car. When we get past that installation and we get past this plate, you'll see that there's wire harnesses that go through. When we get those wire harnesses out of the way, those wire harnesses will have a grommet on the back firewall, and that firewall will allow us to pass the wires that we need to install in the engine bay through. But first we want to pop that grommet out. Of course, I am healthy with a side of fat, so below the AC blower is actually where your wire run will go. As you can see, I've got my first wire run through. That's going to be the wideband wire, and I've got that in the area. We got 2 more set of wires that I want to go ahead and install in that hole where that grommet is at. So I'm going to take those wires and go ahead and put those through the firewall along with this. So what we'll do here, we've got the boost sensor, boost and vacuum sensor from Innovate. Since that sensor is in position, I will place it up forward here as well and find our little position in the back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take both wires and run them in at the same time through the firewall. We can do the wire management and the looming and everything on the outside, so that we don't actually have to deal with any of the nonsense of trying to get these through the firewall and to the inside of the vehicle, as well as putting the loom on them at the same time. So I'm just going to take them in as a twist tie. And what we want to do is, you may want a skinnier person for this. I'm kind of on the thick side, so it's kind of hard for me to get in here. But go ahead, lift the sleeve up, and then get those installed. Better place. Now it may be easier to take this little panel off, but to save yourself the work, you honestly don't have to. So there we go. That slipped in a little easier this time. Hashing down into this area, what we end up doing is getting the wire into that grommet. Got a set of power and data wires, and since I have everything installed for this segment, I've got it tucked away back here, and it will ultimately go into the gauge pod in the center. We will move the cigarette lighter to the side, and then we'll have a 3rd gauge that can work for our purposes for driving, showing boost, showing everything on the gauge. We'll go ahead and put all the panels in this area back in because we're done with that. That will install the wiring harnesses that we need for the gauge in, and we have all the sensors in place except the fuel sensor, which we'll get that installed here shortly. For this portion, we're going to install the modified tensioner. As you can see, this tensioner has been modified to take the little rooster claw area off of it to clear the supercharger, and a provided smaller pulley for the water pump. So with those installed, that will make the clearance we need in order to get this knocked out. As you can hear, it's raining because, go figure, never really get a good break on trying to work on this car or any car. Having a garage would be nice, but there's always some damn rain gonna catch you off guard or whatever. And since I tore into it before it was raining, now I have no choice but to knock it out. So we're gonna get on to it just ever so slightly. Get that belt knocked out. Bam. Alright. Pulley out of there, and then we'll get the tensioner out as well. I'm going to be absolutely wet after this. But because race car, right? Rain, 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 snow, wind, hurricanes, just whatever list of things that can make me go slow as hell on doing these installations happens. But today we say screw it. We getting it done no matter what. Pulley is out, so we're gonna go ahead and get that pulley installed on the front snout. Get the holes lined up here. And what we'll do when these pulleys are installed, I'll go ahead and tighten everything up after we get it in position. You don't want to tighten this up prior to putting the actual belt on, because that won't work. Got the 4 bolts on that pulley installed. Next, we'll take the tensioner pulley out, because we've just got that in position where it's needed to sit. So go ahead here and get this tensioner arm out of the way. Alright. To prepare for installation of the new tensioner arm. And I'll compare the difference of the two for you so you can see. Here she comes, a little hot, or a lot of hot. Oh, toasty. As you can see here, clear difference between the two, and the change is made. Let's go ahead and get that new girl bolted up. I am absolutely wet right now. Okay. I was gonna put a new tensioner on here anyway, just as general preventative maintenance. So this couldn't be more on time, given the circumstances. All right, now we're getting that tightened up. Give that, you wanna be sure that this is torqued properly immediately, because we don't have to wait until the belt's on to properly torque the tensioner. And here comes our tensioner. Lift up on her slightly, and it is in position. Ensure that the belt is properly wrapped over every pulley, including the harmonic balancer, and that they are aligned. And then give her a release. There we go. We'll go ahead here, get to the water pump, and start tightening those bolts. If you're this far in, I do suggest replacing the water pump if it's an old water pump at this point, just because you have to take everything else off and you'll have to drain the coolant system to install the supercharger. So what better time to do that than when everything is broken and the coolant system is broken also. I prefer the Navigator Ford OEM water pump. It's a very high quality piece. There we go. Everything is aligned properly. And we'll move on to the next step. For this portion of the supercharger install for the Vortech V7, this coolant bottle has to leave. This fan shroud also has to leave, and we'll be using a Mustang fan that was provided for it. This power steering will be replaced, as well as this air box. So we're going to take this power steering, this fan, and this cooler out. The new coolant reservoir will be added over here at the fender liner, and those hoses will be rerouted as well. There'll be a few different hoses that do have to reroute, as well as the bypass that goes around to the bracket on the back for the actual cooler. So there'll be a few different changes made in here. Then that'll go to the heater core itself. So there's a few different things that have to come out. The fan will be placed on another shroud, and that'll give us the space for the boost pipes to fit in. For proper clearance for the new fan to go in for the Vortech to install, I'll be moving all of the motor guts as well as the controller from the old fan shroud setup to the Mustang style fan shroud setup. The motor will install directly, and that will keep from having to rewire anything as per the instructions. As you can see, if I did want to replace the motor, I could do that now. We have the two fan blade types. I'll go with the Mustang's fan blade type for that housing, and I'll keep this motor and housing together for the Marauder fan and all of its parts. The coolant is out. The new coolant reservoir will sit here, of course. We're completing alignment and drilling the holes for it, as well as doing the oil change. As you can see in here, the coolant hoses will also be rerouted as well. A few for the top end will be rerouted, so right now we're getting all of that in position so that we could make those changes. So one of the steps that we're on at this point is to install the intercooler bracket on the front area of the car itself. We're going to take this cowling off, and we're going to go ahead and mount this in so that the extension brackets can actually connect to the intercooler. The intercooler is going to be lifted up. I'm going to use the jack to go ahead and do that. So what we're going to go ahead and do here, we're just going to take these, there's some little push pins up front. You may have seen them, and that's pretty easy to just, bam, knock those out, get those up. Each one of those is going to be pulled. There are 3 of them up front. And your bracket for the front is going to come out just like so. Well, I say bracket, but your cowling is going to come out. Now, on this front latch for the hood latch mechanism, you're going to actually have 2 bolts on the side. You should mark those because they do have an adjustment. And we're going to look at this little bracket plate I got here. So if you see, this bracket plate should work pretty good for what we need. It's very, very robust piece. These are all ADTR parts, custom pieces. That's just going to slide right down into this area once these bolts are off. And these holes are going to adjust behind this. You want to be sure this is level because you don't want to eat up the bracket latch on the hood. So we're going to take this off, and then we're going to line those up so that this can be straight, so that when we bring the intercooler up, we have a position to hold it in, because there's some brackets up underneath the vehicle as well. So we're going to knock that out quickly. Alright, so marking everything is very easy. It's only 2 bolts. It's a hood latch. Got myself a Sharpie. Just give that one good mark here in the area along the bracket, and I'm going to do another moon shape on this side around the bracket, and that's just for our adjustment. We don't want to lose the adjustment we've got. Of course, we've got the bracket itself. This bolt these 2 bolts are 8mm bolts. I'm going to use my gear wrench, ratcheting wrench to handle the business. So we'll latch those up to it, and they should come apart pretty easily. Shouldn't have much problem with that at all. And there we go. Since this is the hood latch side itself, what we're going to do is we're going to take this plate and place it between the frame of the car and this latch itself. So the latch will actually have to come out in front of this piece. And we'll do that like so. We'll take a bolt here, and we'll take a bolt there. And what we'll do is we'll get them started so that our little moon shapes we made on the bracket line up. And so we're going to come back to the engine, the front of the car itself. So when installing the bracket, the large holes go on top and the small holes go on the bottom. The small holes are big enough to make the adjustment to install the setup. The small holes are small enough to make the adjustment to install the setup. The large holes are big enough to allow left and right play when you install the bracket latch. So we'll set that here with these corrections understood, and place a bolt in each side, and we'll allow those bolts to move left and right within that whole space and give the perfect adjustment needed to allow this latch to bolt onto the front of the engine. Now what you want to do is go ahead and start the bolts. We'll go ahead and start getting these latched in so we can get the perfect spot for our brackets. Now I've got my arm work out. What we see is we got the bracket fairly clearanced exactly where it needs to be. I may be off by a millimeter at most, but that shouldn't interfere with the hood opening and closing. And we'd like to make sure that we get that checked before we close the hood, because as you know, if the hood latch is not aligned perfectly, sometimes you can end up with the hood jamming, and that's never fun, because then you have to try to work your way into getting back in the hood, and that's always a pain. So we're gonna check our alignment here and see that this is eating in exactly where it needs to be. Things look fairly accurate. We just want to make sure this is tight enough that it doesn't come off the frame or move from vibration. And then we'll proceed forward from there. I feel like that's fairly accurate. This hood's hot. Let's see what we get. Oh yeah, hood's closing perfectly. So all I need to do at this point is pop the hood again, and we'll continue aligning the intercooler and see what we get. So this intercooler is going to be installed in the front of the car. It's a very hefty dang intercooler, man, I ain't gonna lie. It has adjustments, of course, and these are the supports for it. So when you get these supports in, you don't want to tighten everything up fully tight just yet. You want to install this in the front loosely, and you want to get all your pipes and your boost charge pipes fixed to it. And then when you get it installed and you have everything aligned, then you'll tighten these bolts. So this intercooler is very heavy as far as just trying to hold it up yourself. So you'll want to be sure that you have something to support it when you install it up, and we're going to go over that portion here in just a bit. So as you can see here, of course, I've got the intercooler positioned. Now what we're going to do is we're going to guide the intercooler up slowly. This is going to take some work. First time I'm doing this. I'm going to try to use the floor jack to get the elevation I need to get the intercooler set exactly where I would like it to be at, so we can get bolts started and I can put the bottom brackets on. Now if I can do that without a problem, then we're going to be cherry and we can move on to the rest of the piping for the supercharger and get this baby installed reliably and make it solid. Make sure we don't have any trouble, because the vehicle will be daily driven, and make sure that everything is retained properly. So we're going to give this a shot. Now once I get so far, I can't keep my hands in there, but we're getting it up. And what I see is I'm not spotted exactly perfect. I need to come a little bit over to the left here. So I'm going to take after all, getting her up. She just needs the proper tilt. Now we have some front end tabs here that I'm working my way to. And those front end tabs is where I'm going to stop at. We're going to see what we get. You can see we got it positioned up in the area, and I'll give you a closer look at that in a bit. Okay, let's take a dive in and take a peek. So you see the intercooler's coming up to the area. Now the intercooler is going to need to mount to this front bracket. that front bracket's in position, and for the most part, I have the floor jack mounting the intercooler about exactly where I need it, and we're barely holding on to that intercooler, but we will be able to get some better positionment in once I get the brackets on the top in for her. So everything is sitting there. We're relatively close to where we need to be. I'm gonna need to come up just a little bit more, but everything is moving in about how I'd like to see it. So let's keep moving forward and we'll get it mounted in. Coming through with that sniper prone, we're up under the car. As you can see, the radiator core supports. We have one area here, and that's your radiator core support area and your intercooler support bracket. Like I said, these were labeled. One bolt fits one side, the intercooler, and one bolt fits the other side, the non-intercooler side, the radiator core support side. Sorry if I'm out of breath. It is very hot out here. It's about 101 degrees, and you know, it can be taxing on this type of work sometimes. But if you look, I've got the jack off of the car now. It's not even on there. It's just a backup support. I can actually yeet that thing out of the way and install these two segments. So this, of course, everything is free, and this will turn freely by hand, and I have everything adjusted up top so that the intercooler installation can go smoothly. Each side has its denoted area, and what we'll do is we'll cut into the support on the other end of this vehicle so that the piping can go through the fender itself. Over here, that has already been made as a provision for it, so there won't be any issues. Once that's all said and done, then the intercooler will be installed officially. As you know, for the kit from ADTR comes with the Mondo blow-off valve. This thing is huge. They definitely call it Mondo for a reason. You can see the Vortech engineering incorporated on the side, and there's a little model number there for in case you need to see which one this is. This bad boy and the location that it goes in is on the lower end, but we'll figure something out nonetheless. We'll get this part installed, and I'm installing this after I've put the boost pipe in. So hey, we'll see what we get out of this setup once I get that installed, and I'll make sure that this is protected so that nothing gets into it while this vehicle is being driven. That's going to be very important throughout this entire thing, is to make sure that this vehicle can still be daily driven safely without any risk in pretty much almost any condition. As you can see, the Mondo will mount here and it'll be on the bottom. Like I said, I don't really like that being at the bottom. I just had to take the pipe out to make sure things got tightened up and did a few pre-fits. I really don't like that valve being at the bottom. And it's just, honestly, it's one of those things that you kind of have to deal with, but we're going to figure something out to get that moved in a better place or a different place altogether. Now, given the way that I installed everything, you know, we're still driving the car. Remember this. Over here we have the coolant reservoir, and that was a relocation. I kept the same old coolant in the car for that time, but now it's time to drain that coolant out. Because now we're gonna have to replace the crossover, and we're gonna add spacers there, pull the alternator out so that the supercharger can fit in that area. And so we have a few different things that we have to do in order to do that. You've got to drain all the coolant. You don't want any coolant in the system when you pull everything apart. That will make a mess. So we're going to drain the coolant out. We're going to break everything loose at the top, and we're going to move all that equipment out so that we can install the supercharger bracketry and the L bracket for the coolant temp sensor, which that should go between these little areas here, and you'll see that here in a moment. So we have the kit, we have the spacers, brackets, and the holding for the supercharger bracket itself. Look at that bad boy, looks real nice. That will install right here like so. Once that's installed, I will do a dry test fit, and that dry test fit will allow us to see where the blower needs to be clocked for it to go on the front cover. On the front of the engine, we will need to take this bracket off the engine for the that crossover for the coolant for the rear side. This is one idler pulley that they have. I believe that one stays. This idler pulley gets pulled off and replaced with a Dayco idler pulley. And there's some bolts that need to come out the engine front cover. When those bolts come out the engine front cover, the supercharger bolts will go in their place, and that will mount that bracket to the front of the engine. These two bolts have to come out. There's a special stud, and that will fit in place as well. So we've got the blower positioned, and that's only to line everything up. I've got my proper clocking on it. Once the clocking is set, and I think I have the clocking set at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and lock everything down, pull it back apart, and tighten those positions down, and then move the boost pipe so that that can sit exactly where she needs to sit. We're getting close, man. We're getting close, but it takes a step at a time. Pressed for time out here, so I've got to install this no matter what. Went ahead and pulled it back off. We're gonna see if we can get it lined up again. But you know, man, it's all part of the game, especially working out here in the outside. New facilities will be able to do this kind of work on the inside, but this girl's got to be running before that happens. So here we are. Had to loosen the boost pipes up some, as you can see, but we're getting it in there. Had to move that because it just wasn't quite hitting where I needed it to hit. We're gonna make a few modifications there again, and we're gonna see if we can get this stabbed back on the block. Top of the morning, 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 top of the morning. Yeah, we're back here in the morning, getting down into it a little early, so we need to finish up the coolant portion of this. Bada bang, bada boom. Gotta get this, gotta get that. We got them in, and next step would be the coolant pipe. Now there's some obscure instructions about that, and I want to make sure some other things are tightened up right before we get all the other alternator bracketry in here, because there's going to be some alternator support bracketry that goes right in this area, and it has a sequence of bolts and everything in the instructions that you want to be sure that you put, so you can get this and this in. Those are the spacers for the coolant crossover, so it can clearance the alternator and the supercharger. So we got that in. If you look over here, you'll also have a pipe, coolant pipe from the heater system that redirects, and that was because you had to make room for this bracket to go on the engine. So that goes there like so, and that's all we got at this point. So we're gonna go ahead and nut that up. We're gonna get the rest of the boost pipes in order and get those routed up to the top, and we'll move to the next step. So as usual, progress sometimes comes with setbacks. What I noticed here is just like even contacted the guys. I'm like, man, this belt is not long enough for some reason. And I look at the package and I realized I was sent the wrong belt from where I ordered them online. So it's like, okay, this is a 110 instead of a 112, and a 111 is the belt that we need. So I get to take a few more things back off again because of the way this kit's set up. It's kind of hard to pull things on and off, and go ahead and move that in. But you see, I got the routing and everything correct. It's like, man, why won't this reach? And it's like, it's about 1 inch short. And they're like, hey, yeah, it is 1 inch short. So auto parts store it is. Won't be a Gates green belt, but it'll be a belt nonetheless. Probably gonna go ahead and put the other piping on right quick, just because I could get that out of the way before the rain comes, and then I could get that belt. And that's kind of where I'm at on it at this point. But hey, we're making progress. It's just slow, noise, etc. Raining. It's been raining a lot on and off, so we'll see what we can get there. But progress is progress, right? What up, guys? You know we're getting this thing knocked out slowly but surely. Slowly but surely. I need to get a different belt. The wrong belt was basically purchased slightly shorter than what I needed, and we're gonna get a different belt here soon so that we can complete this installation. We're gonna get to tuning because I'm ready to see this thing run. I'm ready to hear it run. It's been a while with it. We've got a lot of recording going on, and I got a little cleanup to do. So as you know, got the Vortech V7 on there, ADTR kit. Shout out to those guys for all the help and assistance in getting all this together so that we can boost the Marauder. I've had second thoughts here and there because of the work, but when it started up, I know it's going to be worth it. So I'm very excited for that part. It's going to be so worth it. All right, so, and I don't recommend this at home, Went ahead and did a test fire, and that test fire was only to be sure that I don't have any engine oil leaks at these points on here, especially while I can access them. We had a lot of belt trouble, and that's basically just figuring out how to get the belt on, and that was because of how they have it set up in the manual Vortech. So Vortech shows you an actual picture of the engine, just like so, and they show this belt going across the tensioner and directly around the pulley here. And so, of course, you know, going along, I'm a visual person, so I followed those set of instructions, and you realize, wait a minute, this doesn't get the right belt length. I'm like, how can this belt even be too short? It's the length that they call for. Well, looking at that closely, and then once I realized what was going on, I was able to figure everything out, and a little bit of chatting back and forth, and I noticed that. So it's like, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. So the car definitely test fired. It was really quiet, impressively, but you know, that's going to be until everything gets buttoned up fully. I just need to put the coolant crossover on, put the boost charge pipes back on their correct position, and we'll go on to the next step. Don't try that at home. I don't suggest doing that. Of course, on all the setup that you do, you need to have this tuned. You don't want to start this up. I powered this up without the mass airflow, and it was only for a brief second, like 5 seconds, just to get oil pressure, to prime up that supercharger with oil pressure and make sure everything runs correctly. Passenger side coolant temp sensor. You have to install this 90-degree adapter, and you'll see this here in just a moment. Of course, you want to have your extensions in the block already, and those will sit like so. And as you can see, if you peek over, that sensor has just enough clearance, and I may clock that a little bit more just to avoid it almost hitting the valve cover, making sensor installation even easier. And one way we can do this, I'll go ahead and grab the sensor here. And there's that sensor. This is a coolant temp sensor. There's more than one on these. You have one on the driver's side, and you've got one on the passenger side. So, just to test our angle, we're gonna thread that bad boy in and see that we're in a good spot for it. Because you can variably move that left or right, and we want to tighten that in from the outside. That'll have to come off anyway as an assembly if you do have to make a change to it. And as you can see, once it is set up in that spot, you just easily plug it in like so from here, and it'll be clearing everything. So that's one of the many steps here to getting this supercharger installed. We're going to get that crossover installed here, and that will give us exactly what we need to proceed and fill the unit with coolant. And once we get coolant in the system, we'll be able to actually button up the rest and fire it up. Okay, so one of the last steps that we actually have to do for this assembly at the top on the driver's side is to install the mass airflow sensor. This is a slot mass airflow style sensor. It's an HPX from VMP. It's one of the higher versions of it. For this 3.5 inch piping, they're good to 800 to 1,000 horsepower. Once we get that installed, we'll basically hook up to it, and there's a few parts that go along with it. So here, included in the ADTR kit, is a Motorcraft pigtail setup for the mass airflow, because the mass airflow style sensor that this car came with is not a slot. It's a blow, what we would call a suck-through mass airflow style. They do have the intake air temperature integrated into them for these year model of vehicles, 2000s range Ford vehicles, or early 2000s, if you will, prior to about 2005 when the Mustang and different vehicles like that started using the slot mass airflow. Now, of course, this mass airflow is made to compensate in this setup for being blow through, because we're going through the intercooler. We have an actual blow off valve, and these are a bit more responsive to that type of modification, so it's actually a better modification to have than a suck through style mass airflow sensor. All in all, when we get that set up here, it's very simple. We've got 2 set screws here. And I'm just going to take that mass airflow sensor. You'll see there's denoted an arrow, and that arrow tells you the direction of the airflow. So I'll take my two set screws out here, being sure not to drop it in the tube because we don't want to take all this apart. If you drop it in the tube, that would suck a lot. I would be mad because I would have to take the entire intake piping off all the way down to the bottom just to get that screw out. So we don't want to drop it in that slot. So you want to be very careful about that. Now, as we see like so, we have that arrow that's pointing, and you can also see here the temperature and the actual mass air element as well, because that's where the air forces its way in. Take that and stick that right in the slot, just like so. Very easy. And you want to take your two set screws and you want to set those in and put those in place. These with the ADTR kit are Allen set screws, so we'll just use an Allen wrench to tighten those down. I'd say no more than about 5 to 10 foot-pound, and really it's being inch-pounds at that point, you know. You don't want to put a lot of, I don't even say 5 to 10 pounds, that's a lot. It doesn't need that much. You basically get them snug and then one more just to be sure, you know, the little you know, you get that little click. That's in place, and that will actually be tight, so you won't have a boost leak here because they have a little rubber grommet on the bottom to ensure that. Of course, this entire assembly is pressurized when under boost, obviously. And this point here at the throttle body and this point are both tightened down. So all we have left to do now is some modifications for the power steering. We have some PCV system parts that need to be moved when the intake box gets installed, and that'll be one of the next steps, is to put the intake box in. I haven't put the intake box in yet because I just don't want that to get in the way of anything else I have to do with the power steering. So I'll go ahead and get the power steering done first before I put that in, just so that everything is clear. I have more freedom. I didn't put the front, well, I guess I would call it the cover for the radiator cover. I didn't put that back in yet, just in case we have to go into the front. I didn't secure everything on the bottom, so we can do another oil leak check, ensure that we have good integrity and we don't have any leaks, because I don't want any leaks on this car. Any work, you don't want any leaks, you know what I mean? The alternator is secured, the belt system is secured all the way through and through. It's time to get coolant filled in, because this is a 2004, 2003. This one's a 2004, but for the 2003 Marauder as well. Most of them take Motorcraft Gold coolant if they hadn't had the coolant changed in them. This car already had coolant in it, and I assume maybe it wasn't changed. Who knows? It had stock transmission fluid in it as well, or at the least it was flushed and the filter was never replaced. So I'm going to replace that fluid. The power steering fluid I'm also going to replace and flush out, just because I might as well. That uses power standard. I get pressed on power steering fluid, or you can get Motorcraft Mercon 5. That's also preferable for a hydraulic fluid for the power steering system. So I'm also going to do those jobs as well, since we have to move the reservoir and get it mounted in. So I might as well do those changes while I'm here, you know what I mean? Other than that, that's pretty much all there is to this portion of steps. I'm going to move on to the next step here. We want to get everything else tightened, and we want to get that air suck intake pipe moved in. Once I get that moved in, then hey, we'll be all up. It'll be uphill from there, or downhill, I would say. It'll be downhill from there. We'll start getting the tune on this thing, and we'll start dialing everything in, and we'll be out there doing our road testing, cruising, and eventually we'll have it on the dyno. So we'll continue moving forward, and we've got a few other steps included. So as we're approaching the closing of the installation of this car, at this point, of course, the blower's in, even got the placard on there from ADTR. This is kit number 21. Coolant pipe's installed, everything's torqued down. The alternator's installed, everything is torqued down as well on that point. I'm going to move this battery cable, improve it, make it a little bit better, and add some shielding to it, additional over the OEM shielding as well, just to make sure heat doesn't affect it. I've got different types of harness material that I'll be using. The mass airflow was installed, and that's working correctly. in the position that it's in. It's clearing the hood so we don't have any interference issues. The last things that I've got to do is install this intake tube in the front, and that's going to happen once I do the leak test and make sure everything is running okay. So that supercharger will just have a filter on it temporarily to start out, and then we'll add the rest of the piping over there to install the housings. We just want to get the coolant filled up and then make sure that everything is installed appropriately. This initial startup test is only to test for leaks and get the coolant circulating in the system a bit. Everything for the most part sounds okay. I have to make a few inspections, get the coolant moved around the system, and then we can see for sure and hook up the blow off valve to an actual vacuum reference so that it can blow off. Because anything that comes out of the supercharger is just being blown right back out the inlet. So there are a few different things that have to be done, but that seems pretty good. We've just got to get to the next step. Relatively speaking, we have everything installed. Of course, we're going to do some more leak tests and make sure everything is in a position where it can work properly. The blow-off valve comes preset, should open at about 4 to 5 HG vacuum, atmospheric. We're going to see how everything starts up. I've just got to mount the reservoir for this power steering fluid thing here, and I'm going to do some tapping in that housing to make that a little bit easier versus how it comes set up. Instead of self-tapping, I'm just going to drill one through and sit it in. So now it's time to load the tune. Wrote a bass tune here already for it. So we're just going to get right to the laptop. And come on in. Let's see what we got here. Let's get our emulation started. Alright. She's not going to emulate here right now. I may have to restart the software, but that's no big deal. We'll get the software restarted and then we'll get in there. Alright, software is restarted. Let's see if we can get our emulation for the hardware again. Oh yeah. We're in there now. We're going to go ahead and upload this bin to the emulator. That's the latest version of that file, 1.01 for the Vortech on E85. And we'll also have to do a gas tune as well for her. But this is the E85 tune because it's always on E85. The gasoline tunes in case of emergencies or situation where we can't get things working. So the tune is uploading right now. And of course, this is a very, very base tune. So startup is going to show us different things that we have to do off top. And that may take us a moment there and all. Tune's uploaded. So now all we really have to do here is get her started up, and we'll just see how everything behaves on that first startup. As soon as I get the keys out, and those are in the depths of my pocket. There we go. Alright, no crank up on that one. We should get a crank up here. Nothing yet. Nothing, so we'll look at some things on the file and get it configured right. So a few things noted. I actually realized I forgot to update the XDF file here because I was tuning on different computers. So the XDF file here wasn't uploaded, and so we just had the bin without the XDF, and you got to have both of them to actually interpolate the value for the scaling. So it wasn't scaled and wouldn't start up. So now we're gonna try with the math here again and see if that makes a difference. That's a little minor problem, but we'll still have to dial the mass airflow in. Let's just get her plugged back in. That's good though, allowing the car a chance to heat up and everything, warm up, get everything in line. And it's a process, you know. It takes a little time, but I realized that was one thing I did forget. So we'll try to give her a start up here again with the updated files. Yeah, she definitely wanted to fire up that time. Doesn't really want to idle, but we'll get it to idle and see what we're getting value-wise. I'm just forcing it to idle at this point because she ain't having it. She's like, I don't want to idle right now. But you will idle. You will idle. We're not letting you not idle today, girl. We are lean as hell. So that's all I needed to know. So I know I can add fuel on this scale. It's trying to idle now. Well, now she is idling. That's kind of funny. It's like, I don't want to idle. And then it's like, okay, bet I'll idle. It's probably in closed loop. Of course, I've got to disable the closed loop and everything. The only reason I left closed loop enabled was so that I could actually get the car dialed in. So we're rich. All right, we're getting a startup now. We're just way too rich on that mass airflow. So we've just got to back off of it a little bit and everything will be all right. Let's let her, I'm letting her get some logs in and see how the vehicle is reacting to everything. We're gonna just tone that mass airflow down a bit, a whole lot of it, because she is like stupid lean, or stupid rich rather, but it is running. So it's actually very quiet. It's not as loud as what you would think it would be kicking it off, but I like it. I like that quietness that it holds when you get that fresh startup in. We're battling a few tune woes, but we're getting everything knocked out as fast as we can. I think that wideband sensor is on its way out. I'll probably replace it. It seemed like it went bad pretty quickly, but hey, you know, it is what it is. I just need to go ahead and get everything accurate on here, and I may try to calibrate it again. If that doesn't work, I'll pick up a replacement and we'll throw it on. I'm gonna see if I can get some test roaming around here in the parking lot area, see if the car will go back and forth, and then we'll get to the next step. Now, this is how you do innovation. This is when you really want to get it in there, but you don't feel like carrying multiple 5-gallon cans. You just take the one big 15-gallon can and just literally attach it to the entire canister, because we're like empty tank anyway. And then that gets you what you need. This is hilarious, but innovative. Oh yeah, nothing but corn going in, E85 fed. Quiet in the back. Business in the front. Trying to make her a sleeper or something like that, I guess.